Hi everybody. So we are focusing today on staff mental health and wellbeing. We're doing this pretty much first week back. So it's the first day back for the vast majority of schools up and down the country today. Some of you are straight into full swing. Children are back, staff are back, straight in there. Some of you have got teacher training days and things like that. So I really wanted to focus my content this week around staff mental health and wellbeing. So you'll find a blog that's come out as well. In that blog, you'll find some toolkits with lots of resources and strategies and things in there. There's also the mini blog Monday where I touch upon lots of other different things that you can have access to. And then we also have our webinar, which we are doing now. So lots and lots of content around staff mental health and wellbeing this week. Hopefully it's all very helpful for you. I will stop waffling on and we can start thinking about staff mental health and wellbeing. So in terms of what we're going to cover today, we're going to cover all of these areas. So first and foremost, we're going to start thinking about vicarious trauma and what that means. We're going to link that into thinking about empathic relationships and how, because we have empathic relationships with children and young people, sometimes we develop vicarious trauma. We will also take the time then to pause and reflect upon what we know and understand about trauma and how that impacts ourselves and our bodies. And that will then lead us into what can we do now? What can I do first and foremost now to help? And then we'll cover lots of different strategies that are body-based, so body-based approaches that you'll find quite helpful. And then we'll finish on a couple of analogies that I'd like to leave people with, just to pause, a little bit of food for thought, and then we'll leave you with my contact details in case anybody wants to get in touch. So first and foremost, who am I? So I am Tanya Birch. I am our mental health program manager here at Innovating Minds. I work with a absolute mass of people up and down the country, really focusing on education mental health as a whole. So I work with some people because they use Edupod, our online system for senior mental health leads. Sometimes they come and do their senior mental health leads training with us. Some people are in our centralised mental health support hub. So there's lots of different routes that I work with people, but I work with hundreds of schools nationally, and we really strive for national impact, and I absolutely love my job. I wouldn't change my job for the world. In terms of me and my background, I don't like to dwell on this bit too much because sometimes I think there's nothing worse than when somebody sits there talking about themselves for ages. But I do like to bring to people's attention that though I have quite a vast amount of kind of academic knowledge, if that makes sense, through like my masters and lots of other different like courses and training and stuff, the thing for me that's the most important, that I think has had the biggest impact on my ability to do this role, is that first-hand experience in schools. So I've worked in education for the last eight, maybe 9 years now. And a large chunk of that I worked in a pupil referral unit for children and young people who were experiencing mental ill health. A lot of those children had a co-diagnosis of autism and things like that. So it really, in that role, I was the senior mental health lead in that school, amongst many, many other things, and we really started it from the ground up. So I have worked with some very young, very vulnerable children and young people. I've worked with the school as a whole, lots of other schools. So I really like to bring to people's attention that I'm not just one of the people that's coming into your school or talking to you today from a point of I've read this book and this book and this book, because all of those things are important, agreed, yes they are, but also having that first-hand experience in schools for me is the real thing I like to share with people. I understand schools, I've been in schools, I've done this journey, I've done the training, so it really allows me to have a holistic picture. Moving on, that aside, vicarious trauma. Some people have heard of this before. Some people have heard of it more as secondary traumatic stress, and some people are completely oblivious and have no idea about it at all whatsoever. That was me. I was that person. So in that school that I was working in, I was working, like I said, about 8 or 9 years. And it wasn't until I left that school and I started working and doing what I do now that I picked up on vicarious trauma, and I really resonated with me that was something that I was experiencing. And not not through any reflection on the school, but just through, as we're going to talk about in a minute, because of the empathic relationships that I had with the children and the young people that I was working with, that had an impact upon my own mental health and well-being, sorry. And I was experiencing symptoms of vicarious trauma that I was completely unbeknown to at the time. So vicarious trauma is a secondary trauma that is pretty much resulted from an indirect exposure. So the children that you're working with will be coming to you and talking to you about perhaps traumatic events that they've experienced, vulnerable things that have happened to them, or anything like that, really. So what tends to happen is you experience that with them, because we have empathic relationships with the children and young people that we're working with. And I think it's really unrealistic to expect ourselves not to do that. If a child comes to you and talks to you about how they're feeling or something that's happened to them, it's not often that we'll just go, oh, that's a shame, and we'll feel sorry for them, i.e. sympathetic relationships. What we generally tend to do is really support them through it. We try to understand how they may be thinking and feeling, and that there is an empathic relationship. And it's because of these empathic relationships that sometimes we can develop vicarious trauma. So as I've just said, there's a real difference between sympathetic relationships and empathic relationships. So if I'm looking down a well and I'm peering in a well and there's somebody, let's say somebody's fallen down, if I'm looking in and I just go, that's a real shame, gosh, that must be, you know, that's not very nice. That's a sympathetic relationship that you've got for that person down at the bottom of the well. You feel sorry for them. An empathic relationship would be really starting to try to experience what they're experiencing. You put yourself in their shoes. You think about how might they be feeling right now? What must they be going through right now? How might I be able to help that person? That is an empathic relationship. And the vast majority of the time, those are the relationships that we as staff and as adults in these schools and settings we're working in, we have that relationship with the children and young people that we're working with. And it's really because of all of those things that we're exposed to, in addition to some of the information that we're exposed to, because let's not forget, particularly some people who are safeguarding leads or inclusion managers or pastoral managers, they are exposed to lots and lots of different records, and can be really taking in a lot of, you know, delicate information about these children and young people. And all of those things can have an impact on us, on our well-being, on our minds and our bodies. Not only that, but we are not just professionals in schools. So yes, we may be experiencing vicarious trauma within school and within our work capacity, but you might actually be experiencing vicarious trauma from an external capacity. So from your own life outside of work, are you supporting somebody else and you're experiencing their traumas with them as well? Sometimes it can be a case of actually there is direct traumas because I have experienced direct trauma through, you know, this event or this that's happened or this that's happened. So there's a lot of personal trauma that can be happening for people as well as all these everyday factors that crop up and that come up. Cost of living crisis being the, you know, the main thing at the moment, mortgages and all these other things that come into play. All of these things can really start to fill up our buckets and can really start to have an impact upon us, particularly if they are left unprocessed. And that's where sometimes what we need to pay attention to is, what do we know and understand about this trauma or this unprocessed trauma? In developing your understanding of trauma and unprocessed trauma and how that impacts our mind and our body, it's allowing you to really take the time to pause and reflect on yourself as an individual to figure out what strategies or what things are going to be the most impactful for you as an individual to start really processing some of this trauma and working your way through. So it's about drawing your attention to shifting away from assuming everybody likes to talk. Not everybody likes to talk, and particularly if you're functioning from your safety survival part of your brain, talking therapies are less likely to be impactful for you. We'll come on to that in a little bit more detail in a minute, but it will be less impactful for you than, let's say, body-based approaches. So we're starting at the minute with an understanding of what do we know about trauma, and that will lead us into thinking about what strategies are going to be the best suited for you based on what we know about trauma. So First things first, trauma is stored as a memory in our body. It is not stored as a memory in our brain. And that is why if you are functioning from your safety survival part of your brain, or if you have a lot of this vicarious trauma, excuse me, or unprocessed trauma, then we need to start with our body, because that trauma is stored as a memory in our bodies and not our brain. So aches and pains, cold-like symptoms, IBS and bloating. Sometimes your heart rate starts going. Sometimes your thinking brain's just not with you. You can't quite rationalize or think cognitively, or you're forgetful and you forget things. Sleeping can be a real thing. Some people's sleep is really disturbed and they don't understand why. Headaches. I used to get a headache every single day, and I went to the opticians for a new pair of glasses every single day, and I just couldn't understand what was going on. Unprocessed trauma. Likewise, number one thing that comes up in schools is illnesses just before you're about to break up. So your body is preparing for that. I'm about to break up for the summer holidays. And in that kind of body's breaking up for the summer holidays, everything starts to come out then. All of that unprocessed trauma will start to come out in your body, i.e. cold and flu-like symptoms, I'm not feeling well. Normally just before you break up, or day one of your summer holidays, or half term or whatever. That's the one that normally gets people's attention, and that's the one that people normally go, yep, that's me. In fact, I have just delivered this training that I'm doing in this webinar to a school within an academy trust that I'm working with, and every head in that room nodded. Everybody said, yeah, that's me. Everybody was getting ill or sick, particularly day one, or that first week of the summer holidays that we've just returned back from. That's the one that people normally go, okay, I'm listening. And it's what got me, because I was a bit like, okay, headaches all the time, sick always before a holiday, you've got my attention. So what can we do? Now, understanding what we can do needs to come from an understanding of our bodies and our brain. And this is why what I bring to everybody's attention is the brain hand model by Dan Segal. I want to come back to this slide in a second, but we're going to talk about this for now. So we're going to talk about the brain hand model. Now, when I talk about this is going to give you an understanding of why it's important to know where you are at in amongst all of this, so that you can figure out what strategies are going to be the best and most impactful for me as an individual. So Dan Segal talks about the brain hand model, and he talks about it from a perspective of your hand is your brain, and this part here, your body, this part here, your arm, is your body. Skipping ahead of myself there. So your thumb is your emotions and your limbic system. And this part of our brain, the bit that I'm wiggling at you, this is our thinking part of our brain. So a regulated brain looks like this. So our thinking part of our brain is keeping our emotional part of our brain in check. Our brain is talking to our body, and our body is talking to our brain. This is your regulated brain. However, what starts to happen when we start experiencing, whether that's direct trauma, whether that's vicarious trauma, whether that's, a great amount of unprocessed trauma, all these life experiences and stress and all this other stuff, as all of that starts to build up and add to us as people, what can happen is our thinking brain flips itself offline. And that allows our brain to be thinking very much from a purely emotional standpoint. So at this point, my ability to rationalize, think about strategies, all of those things are not there for me, because they are cognitive thinking strategies. Things like talking therapy, things like CBT, they all require a cognitive capacity. So they're not going to be impactful for you at this point. Sometimes what also can happen is this part of our brain here also goes a little bit like, okay, what's going on here? What's happening? I know that I don't feel right, but I can't quite put my finger on how I'm feeling. Am I angry? Am I sad? Am I ecstatically happy? Sometimes we are aware of something that's manifesting or happening for us, but we don't quite know what's going on. I don't quite know how I'm feeling. I just know there's something strange going on. And what's happening at these points actually is you're functioning from your safety survival part of your brain. And what's happening at that point is things like talking therapy, CBT, taking the time to really process something and pick it apart, All of those things are not going to be helpful for you because your thinking brain has flipped offline. It's not connected. So what's happening here when this has happened is your thinking brain isn't talking, your brain, sorry, isn't talking to your body, and your body isn't communicating back to your brain. So what do we do at this point? Now, this is where what I want to do is come back to this video that I'd like to share with you. Hi everybody, I wanted to share something with you today that I saw recently myself. I really appreciated the visual representation of it, but I also wanted to bring it to your attention from the perspective of the brain-hand model. And so this clear glass of water here is a representation of a regulated brain. And our regulated brain, as we know from our brain-hand model, looks a bit like this. So our emotions and our thinking part of our brain are working together in cognition with our body. Our brain talks to our body and our body talks to our brain. This is our regulated brain, and this is represented by our glass today. Now, as we start to experience things in life, as we start to go through lots and lots of different things like trauma. Now, we talk about trauma quite a lot, which is why I'm saying that today. As we start to experience things like trauma, excuse me, or as we start to experience things like loss or grief, or just the everyday things that come with life, that can really obscure our ability for our brain to work within this regulated phase that we've just talked about. And it can be very difficult at this point to see clearly. And so this is a representation of how sometimes our brain can flip its lid. And sometimes our emotional part of our brain is not really connected with us either. And so sometimes we're functioning from here in our brainstem and in our body, which is our safety survival part of our brain. What can we do? Now, there are lots of things that you can do. So let's talk about some of the options. So what you can do is jump straight into processing. So you can spend the time to really try and process everything that you have gone through in the first instance. Taking the time to process something isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's not necessarily the first and foremost thing that I would recommend that you do. And I say that because what happens at this point is we get a little bit of clarity. So this bit starts to clear up. We're suppressing what's up here and trying to stop it from coming up, and that normally looks like the you're okay, and then somebody says, are you all right, and then you're in floods of tears. Or if you're anything like I am, the smallest of things happen and it's like, that's it, everything's gone to pot now. So like I think previously I dropped a glass and it smashed, and it was like my brain at that point just went poof. That was the final straw. That's very much a representation of what's happening here. So we can see somewhat clearly, but we're suppressing everything on the top. And what happens then is things like I'm going around the supermarket and there's a trigger, and then what happens is it all gets zhuzhed back up again. So if I use myself as an example, and that links Africa analogy that we talked about previously, if I'm in Tesco's and I get that smell, links Africa, sets me off, that's it. I am very emotional. Sometimes I start feeling really, really sick. My heart is racing, I'm sweaty, I'm clammy, and I'm in the middle of what's going to be a not very nice anxiety attack. So what's happened is I've suppressed everything. I've got a sense of clarity, but then a trigger happens and all of that gets zhuzhed back up again. And then suddenly I've lost my regulated brain again. This isn't impactful because what's happening is our body and our brain are not connected, so they're not talking. But what you're trying to do is use your brain to stay regulated. So it's almost like my brain's working. If I got rid of this bit and I was just an arm, it's almost like my brain is working here and my body's working separately underneath me, because you're trying to get your brain to function from a capacity that you're not in. So you are here and you're trying to force your brain to function here. It's not impactful in the long run. It's completely exhausting, because what's actually happened is you're going from this to this, and then a trigger happens, so then this happens, but then you get a little bit of clarity after a while, so then this sort of happens, but then a trigger happens, and then you're back like this again. It's really, really exhausting, and it's really, really not impactful for you in the long run. So what else can we do? We can try and talk it away. We can try and get rid of it, remove it. I don't want it. That tends to be something else that we see quite a lot. And so what's happening at this point is I am cognitively focusing on all of these things, and I'm trying to get rid of them. So I'm going to spend all my time scooping it out to try and remove it. Now, don't get me wrong, some of this is going, so you're going to get some clarity back. Yes, I agree. But whilst you're doing this, whilst you're spending all your time, energy and effort cognitively to get rid of all of this trauma or all of these life experiences, what I'm actually losing is some of the good stuff. I'm losing some of that clear water, and some of that clear water is me. So as I spend all of my time trying to get rid of everything, or I spend a lot of my cognitive capacity thinking, overthinking, questioning, trying to understand it, I'm losing a lot of myself whilst I'm trying to do that. And that's because, again, you are functioning here in your safety survival part of your brain, and you're trying to operate here at a cognitive level. Your body and your brain are not communicating at this point, so the signal from here is just not getting up here to say, okay, I want to use my cognitive brain right now. So it's not going to be impactful for you either. So what can we do? The best and first and foremost thing to do is think about putting in all of these body-based approaches. Body-based approaches will allow your body to reconnect to your brain, and only when that reconnection and that re-establishment has happened are we able to then possibly think about the whole, let's process some of these emotions that we've gone through here, and then let's think about an understanding of what happened maybe, which is here. But this cannot happen when the brain and the body are not talking and are not communicating. So body-based approaches need to come first and foremost. And what happens when you start to use all these body-based approaches, i.e. my water, is over time, as you start to add in more of this good stuff, the body-based approaches, and you allow your body and your brain to reconnect, is we start to get a lot more clarity. We start to see our brain and our body come back into connection with each other, and suddenly our water is much more clearer. Now, I haven't got rid of everything. As you can see, there are still some little bits in there floating around, and that's because trauma doesn't ever really leave us. We learn from it, and those learned experiences will remain with us, but it remains with us from a perspective that it isn't impacting us and our everyday lives, but it's part of our life, it's part of our journey, and that will always remain with us. So no, I haven't got rid of everything, but I have got to a point where my brain and my body are now connected, which means this part can happen, this part can happen, and this part can happen. So we can either spend all of our time trying to get rid of all this bad stuff, or we can spend all of our time putting in all of these body-based approaches. And that was really the reason why I wanted to share that video with you. Something I hear an awful lot is, oh, I've been doing this for 10, 15 years and I've seen and heard it all and nothing phases me. That is so unrealistic. And usually the people that are having those conversations are the people that need the most support from us in the first and foremost instant. I was that person. I was working with some very, very vulnerable children and young people, and I honestly felt like nothing could faze me. And cognitively, maybe nothing was phasing me, but my body and my central nervous system was really starting to experience all of this unprocessed trauma, and it was really starting to have a real negative impact on my body and how I was functioning in my everyday life. And that's why it's so important that we keep coming back to this concept of trauma is processed in your body and your nervous system, and it's not processed at a cognitive level. So in that video, I talked about the Lynx Africa. So that's a personal thing for me. So I will, if somebody walks past me and I get that smell, I straight away, my heart rate's up, I'm clammy, I'm panicking, I'm really not in a good place. And all of that happens before my brain says, that's Lynx Africa, I don't like that smell. And sometimes that acknowledgement at a cognitive level afterwards can take a while. It can take me a long time to go, oh, no, it's because of that smell as I walk past that person that was wearing that aftershave. And so really, what I like to get to a point of at this point is, what I'm not saying is that talking therapy, CBT, and all these cognitive based things don't work for people. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it's important to acknowledge where you are as an individual. If you are operating from your safety survival part of your brain because of all of these unprocessed trauma or vicarious trauma, then those kind of strategies and things may not be the most impactful and beneficial for you. And what will be are these body-based approaches. And so I try to put it into a little bit of a journey, if you like. So I'm taking the time to reconnect. I'm taking the time to make sure that my brain and my body are communicating. I'm making sure that this part's happening. Then I may engage in some form of, okay, my brain, my body are connected now. I feel safe and secure. So I'm going to start trying to process some of these. How am I feeling right now? How are these feelings making my body feel? And that may be this part starting to happen and come back online. Then I might start thinking of, and engaging in some form of reflective practice where I'm thinking about incident debrief forms, if it's as a collective, or I'm just taking the time to understand what happened for me as an individual. And that's when this part starts to happen. And then suddenly our body is communicated to our brain. We are processing, we are understanding, and we are regulated. But we can't jump to here. We can't jump to here if this bit's not happening. And I bring the brain and the body to your attention and the importance of that, because this is the most common thing that we see in schools. It's the most common thing that I come across with all of the schools that I'm working with. Straight away, there's always some form of supervision in place, clinical supervision in place. There's a counsellor they can talk to. There's an external agency that can get involved with for therapy and things like that. All of those kind of cognitive capacity brain parts are normally in place and well established. But what isn't is those body-based approaches and an understanding of why they are important in the first and foremost instance. Because if your body-based approaches aren't happening and you're operating from your safety survival part of your brain, then anything that's at a cognitive capacity isn't going to be impactful for you because you're not operating from that point. So you need to bring your body and your brain back online together first through body-based approaches to allow some of these other more different therapies like talking therapy or, CBT or therapists or, all these other ones can be the most impactful. So what are body-based approaches? First and foremost, it's not about trying to work with your rational thinking mind. That's what we're not trying to do. We're moving that to one side. We're not trying you are not trying to work with yourself from a rational thinking point. We're not thinking about, don't think like this, think like this. What we're trying to do is really calm and connect to your central nervous system. And when you calm and connect your central nervous system, that allows for all these other things, as we've just said, to follow. So what can some of these body-based approaches look like? So breathing strategies are really, really helpful to calm your central nervous system. There are so many different ones out there. These are just a couple that I have found useful or that I've found particularly resonated with some of the other schools and people in schools that I've been working with. So finger to thumb breathing is a really helpful one. And all we're doing is finger to thumb breathing and we are breathing. The finger to thumb is part of that connection. So it doesn't have to be finger to thumb. You may just place a hand on your chest. You may place a hand on your face or your arm, or you may just have a connection to yourself. When you do that and you have that connection to yourself, you're naturally starting to calm your central nervous system down. If you're able to have that connection with somebody else, that can also be particularly helpful when you're engaging in these breathing strategies. So, for example, with your partner, if you can hold hands, having a hug or a cuddle, or that pressure, all of those things can really help when you're doing those breathing strategies. If you think about a baby, when a baby's born, they say that to place the baby skin on skin with the mum, right? So whilst I'm not saying go and get skin on skin contact with someone, you know, that might not be up your street, but what I'm saying is it's the same kind of concept of, if you have your hand on yourself, there is a connection there. Your central nervous system will start to calm and regulate. If you're holding somebody's hand, or you have your hand on somebody else's chest, or you're having a hug, those ways of connecting can really allow breathing to be regulated, which can allow your central nervous system to feel calm and connected and safe. Heart rate breathing is a really good one, and heart rate breathing is really just about finding your heart rate. And I don't mean like when you're in PE and you go like this and you find your heart rate, or you go like this and you find your heart rate. That's not what I mean. What I mean is taking a breath, empty your lungs, and feel your heart rate. You can feel your heart beating in your chest if you calm and regulate enough. And in doing so, you then regulate your breathing around that. If that's difficult, or you're not in a position to do that, again, having somebody that's with you where they can help you to regulate, so you're doing a little bit of co-regulation through breathing, can be really, really impactful as well. Movement is really, really helpful. Movement is the most impactful for people who move. What I mean by this is, if you're a gym goer, or if you're always on the go and you're constantly doing something, you're constantly moving around, where you might be like walking, you might play a sport of some sort. If you do that, then movement's going to be the most impactful for you to calm your central nervous system. Generally speaking, the body and the central nervous system likes familiarity. So for me, for example, movement is one of the biggest things that I need. I need movement to feel calm and to feel regulated. And that's because I played badminton for the vast majority of my youth, up until probably my mid to late 20s, I would say. I played badminton very, very competitively. I was always at the gym. I was always training. I was always in a county here or a county there. I was always doing some form of exercise. So my body, as soon as I start walking, I'm calm, I'm regulated. As soon as I go for a run, I'm calm, I'm regulated. My body appreciates that familiarity, alongside, obviously, we all know the benefits of exercise and walking and things like that is good for our bodies anyway, because it releases lots of endorphins in our brains, and all of that is helpful for us. But particularly if you are a person of movement, the familiarity of movement can help to really calm your central nervous system. So whether that's yoga, exercise, walking in nature, whatever that movement looks like, just make sure it's something that is beneficial for you. Something else that's particularly helpful when we're thinking about body-based approaches are some of these grounding strategies. Now, when we're thinking about grounding, what we generally tend to say, again, is find a connection. So it can be a connection with yourself, but really try to connect with something else. So you may make sure that your feet are flat on the floor, or you may just have a connection to something. So this is just a wall here that I'm placing my hand on and I've got a connection to. My feet are flat on the floor and I've got some connection to the ground that I'm on as well. When you're grounding, there's lots of different strategies and things that you can do. Again, there's lots of different things out there that you can research and look into. Two that I find particularly helpful, or that people that I've been working with have suggested and recommended, are one that's called 5 things, and this is a sensory based strategy. So you're looking around the room for 5 things you can see. You're looking around the room for 5 things you can smell, X, Y, Z. So we're looking to engage with your senses, and in doing that, in that pattern of, so I'm not just doing one and not the other, I'm doing all of my senses in that pattern. In doing that can really start to calm your central nervous system, because you're pulling together and reconnecting all of your senses, which reconnects your body to your brain, and your central nervous system can start to feel calm again. Cold water therapy can be another really good one. So there's the extreme of that, which seems to be quite popular at the minute, that cold water submersion in those big, like, inflatable pods that you just sit in. I'm not sure that would be the best thing for me. but each to their own. It's quite a popular one at the minute. There's a lot of research out there for cold water therapy and how it can really help to calm the central nervous system in the long run, not necessarily in the immediate term, but in the long run, it can really, really help. Some people don't quite go that far through. Some people like to just run their wrists or their hands in freezing cold water, or they'll take a really cold shower, those type of things. That's more up my street. I like to just run my hands or my wrists under freezing cold water. It's very calming for me. It's very calming for my central nervous system. Body scanning is also another really good one. So when we body scan, what we're really trying to do is be really focusing on in the present, and we're looking through more active meditation. So some people, when they meditate and they do body scans, will like silence, and they will just sit and they will do their body scan in the silence. Some people will like a guided version of that. And if that's you, that's me. If that's you, then YouTube will be very much, very, very helpful for you. There are a lot of body scan guided meditations on YouTube that will talk you through exactly what to do. But ultimately, it's about always trying to come back to your body. So we are only human and we all have fleeting thoughts. My brain's like a train. And sometimes I genuinely think, how on earth did I get from here to here? And the two are just nowhere even relatable. I don't know how that happens sometimes, but it does. We start thinking about one thing that leads to something else, that leads to something else, that leads to something else. And so a body scan is about starting at your feet and kind of scanning all the way up. How do I feel in my feet today? Can I feel anything? Am I connected? Is anything hurting? Am I uncomfortable? And you start working your way all the way up through your body. In amongst that, you'll have all these fleeting thoughts, and it's about trying to pull it back to your body and to your central nervous system. And in doing so, and in being really present in how your body is feeling and is connected to the, you know, your wider extremities, your fingers, your toes, that can be very, very calming for your central nervous system as well. Ultimately, there will be some people that are looking at all of these things that I've said, or even recommendations that I've suggested, and go, none of that feels like anything that I can do. That doesn't resonate with me at all. And that's okay, because we are all individuals and we're all people. The main thing to take from it is engage with something that you enjoy. That's the most important thing. When you engage in something that you enjoy because you want to and because it's for you, that releases lots of endorphins in your body anyway, because you're enjoying it. It's something that you want to do, and that can really start to calm your central nervous system and your brain and help you to feel regulated as well. One thing I say is pay particular attention to if it's something you want to do. So if it's something somebody else has said, why don't you just go and take a walk, and then you go for a walk, that's not something that you want to do. It's something somebody else has recommended that you do. So really focus on something that you enjoy because you like to do it, not because somebody else told you to or because somebody else says it's good for you. Something that you enjoy for you as an individual. Taking the time to remember that we are lots of different things to lots of different people. We are teachers, we are professionals in schools, we are mums, we are dads, we are aunts, uncles, sisters, you know, we are lots of different things to lots of different people. But focus on you. What do you like to do? And engage with something that you like to do and that you enjoy. When we start to put in all of these body-based approaches, it really starts to allow the body to communicate back to the brain, which can then allow some of these other therapies like talking therapy or CBT or counselling and things like that to be the most impactful, because our body is in a regulated place to be able to do it. When we're trying to just operate from a cognitive capacity, but actually our body and our brain aren't communicating, then what we're doing isn't going to be the most impactful, and sometimes can feel really frustrating. I know for me, I engaged in something for a very long time with very little impact, and I couldn't understand why. And it's because actually I needed to start with the body-based approaches first. So take the time to figure out, where are you within amongst all of this? Where am I? Am I in that position of, no, I really need to start with these body-based approaches? Or am I a little bit further, down the line, and we're thinking, okay, no, my brain is communicating to my body. I'm ready now to start processing. I'm ready to start understanding. Maybe then we are going to these talking therapies and things like that. Take the time to figure out where you are at within this. Take the time to figure out what is going to be the best suitable to you, but really take the time to think about these body-based approaches, because they are so impactful in calming your central nervous system and reconnecting your body and your brain to allow for all these other things to fall into place as well. One thing I like to leave people on at this point is to take the time to think about when you board an aircraft, when you go on holiday, so you go on an aeroplane, one of the first things they tell you when they go through all these safety precautions is to make sure you put your own mask on before you put on somebody else's. That is the way you need to think about yourself and your own mental health and well-being, because we cannot pour from an empty cup. We cannot be fully present with the people that we are with if we are not fully present with ourselves. We cannot support the people that are around us the most impactful way if we're not taking care of ourselves and our own needs first and foremost. Sometimes it can feel quite selfish. I am very guilty of that. Sometimes I feel very, very guilty for, you know, saying to my husband, I just need to go take some time for myself to meditate, or I just need to go for a walk. I just need to get out of the house for 5 minutes. Sometimes like that, you know, I feel very guilty for that. But ultimately, I can't be present with my family. I can't be present with the students that I'm working with, for you guys as staff in schools, if you are not fully present with yourself. So really, really, really take the time to pause and reflect on that and figure out where you're at in amongst all of this, and figure out what strategies are going to be the most impactful for you, particularly those body-based approaches. If anyone's got questions, concerns, topics, anything at all, please reach out. My email is on the screen. You are more than welcome to email me. Topic areas you want covering, drop them in an email to me. It's what I would rather cover, content that's relevant, rather than me covering content that I think is relevant. There's also a absolute wealth of other webinars on the same page as you've accessed this one, so please go and take a browse through those as well. All the other webinars are still free for you to access, to share within your school community to help with that development of understanding and knowledge, so please use those. And there's also the YouTube channel as well, where you'll find the video that I shared to you just now with the water, but you'll find lots and lots of other content on there as well in terms of just education, mental health as a whole. So stuff about pastoral teams, stuff about student support systems, everything in terms of education, mental health. You'll find content in that YouTube channel as well. They go live every week, twice a week. So on a Monday, we do mini vlog Monday, and on a Thursday, there is Top Tips Thursday. So take the time to have a look across there as well. And as I keep saying, if you need anything or any questions or concerns, please just reach out to us, because it's what we're here for. And I'll see you all very soon.